Task 10 is performing a running suture in a simple running fashion. For this exercise we will use an 18-inch 3/0 nylon suture as shown here on a cutting needle. The needle should be loaded appropriately. We're using the Limbs and Things small wound closure pad as our model. It is oriented perpendicular to the bench edge. We have a 10-centimeter long ellipse cut out into the model for about a 5 mm depth. There are a total of 11 sets of suture targets. These are at 1 centimeter intervals, and they are spaced about 5 mm back from the wound edge, and they start in each corner. This is a running exercise, and we will start it by placing our suture into the corner. We can usually achieve this with one bite, and you can see I'm fine-tuning my movement such that I exit directly in that suture target. Otherwise I will be assessed error points. I will then shorten my tail to about 2 to 3 centimeters as shown here. Place my instrument within the tails, do 2 wraps to achieve a surgeon's knot, cross my hand such that it is flat, lay it down into the tissue, cross my hands again, throwing the opposite throw. We will throw 4 square knots as shown here. Since this is monofilament suture, I will then cut for myself between a 5 and 10 mm tail in the corner such that it does not get in the way. I will then reload, use my forceps, and take relatively large bites of this model tissue such that my needle is about 5 mm deep into the tissue. Importantly, I will load as shown here using my forceps to enhance my proficiency, I should say efficiency, and to prevent needle sticks loading by hand. We'll pull the suture strand in the direction of the wound such that this tissue is closed. In other words, we will follow ourselves on each throw. Again, take one bite, load in the wound, take the second bite, pull the wound closed as shown here, and we will keep moving our way down the model. I would emphasize learning how to load within the wound without pulling up a great deal of suture. You can see if I pull up a lot of suture, it simply gets in my way as shown here. There is really no need to do that. Instead, we will take a bite. We will barely pull in any suture, just enough to rest the needle on top of the simulated skin, and pass the needle through for a second bite. Also note that I'm palming my needle driver. We expect our trainees to do this to have more control and more flexibility. Palming the needle driver also allows you to truly take perpendicular bites. We also expect you to be able to pull in the direction of the wound. If you pull across the wound, it tends to pull through the model more easily and leave a gap between the tissue edges. Again, take note that if I palm the needle driver, I can truly come in perpendicular to the skin edge as shown here, as is taught to be good technique. And as I conclude the closure of this elliptical wound as shown there, I can oftentimes one bite my closure, since the wound edges are much more closely approximated at this end of the exercise. And I will take my final stitch here, place my forceps down, grab the suture strand itself, and I will do an instrument tie, again with a surgeon's knot, to the loop itself. I will pull on both edges of the loop as shown here, such that it slides down appropriately. lost a bit of tension, so I'll redo it. And I can grab, tie my second throw. Make sure that I square off my final throws. And then I will cut all three of these tails, the loop plus the original tail, to about 5 to 10 millimeters, and the exercise is completed. Pitfalls were, as I showed, by not pulling along the suture the entire time, you can have gaps, and we will measure those in millimeters and assess errors at every 1 centimeter intervals along this wound closure. We will also assess how closely the needle went through the targeted markings as a measure of accuracy, and we will also measure these two knots as we did originally for our interrupted knots for knot slippage, again underlying or underscoring the importance of forming truly square knots. And there is also breakage penalty if the suture strain is broken at any point.